Let's do it. Zdravo svima, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Zalet Podkasta, podcasta o dizajnu digitalnih proizvoda. Kao i uvek, sa vama smo to mi, Dragan Babić i Arsenije Ćatić.
Arsenije Ćatić.
And it's our big, how to say, like the honor to have our special guest today, Matt Ström-Awn. Yay! And now let's roll with our intro. Pa 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 pa. Okay.
Hello.
This was the awkward bit that you were talking about. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for responding to our cold email, and thank you for taking the time to actually speak with us.
I'm sorry, what is his name? Archie and I were talking when he sent you an email, and we were like, this guy's not going to answer. Like, why would he ever reply to this email? And we were convinced that we're not going to get a reply, and then you actually replied. So really, really stoked about that.
Pretty significant part of how I've ended up where I am in my life is because I will respond to random emails and talk to people who want to talk. So this has always served me well, and I'm just really thrilled that y'all reached out.
Awesome. That's like serendipity. Yeah. Enabling serendipity.
Will you be open to disclose some of the most significant random emails that you replied to? If it's not a secret.
I think that I have like a number of friends who have, I mean, this wasn't like big business opportunities where I got an email from like, you know, a Saudi oil baron who was like, I have $10 million to send you.
Nigerian
and I responded
prince.
And it was actually real. But it's more like, you know, somebody will email me and be like, hey, I read your thing or I saw you on Twitter or whatever. And would you want to get coffee? And I'll just like get coffee. And then, you know, years later, we're good friends and, you know, it's a meaningful relationship. So now I obviously have had a lot of those that I don't ever talk to them again, but you know, sometimes it's great. And then sometimes we end up working together. But I'm of the opinion that if you just say yes to things, you know, you're much more likely to have an interesting and rich life. Interesting, certainly rich. I can't make any guarantees.
This is so nice to hear because for some reason, I don't know why, I'm at this stage in my like professional life where I'm really beating myself down about like not being good at self-promotion marketing, that sort of thing. You know, I fucking hate that. And for most of my life, I've sort of my business strategy was just hang out with interesting people, do cool things, and hope that the world responds. But I was always afraid to admit that, you know, because that's not that's not what professionals do. That's not what I read on fucking Twitter from marketers who are telling me I need to have a strategy. I need to have like a content calendar and I need to nail down 3 hours every day of posting on LinkedIn. So it's really nice to hear that you're kind of vibing your way through life as well.
Yeah, I think that it's so much. I mean, I think your approach is a good one. I think that it works. You know, you're clearly doing well, and I think the people on Twitter and LinkedIn, whatever, might be projecting a lot of, you know, in their own insecurities into the world, and that's fine. Those are
so
places
hard to be
for those
immune
people.
to that.
I know.
Yeah.
It's so weaponized to take advantage of your own fears of not being good enough. So I don't know. It's
I
unhealthy.
wonder if that's by
but-
design.
Oh,
If-
absolutely. And then they'll say you need to be doing these things. By the way, I have this 3-hour course that you can take to learn how to do. There's
Like under the table,
or like, you know, they always have something to sell. It's like people who people turn, and I've seen this happen to a number of designers and design leaders who go from having a lot of interesting things to say, they build an audience, then they decide that they're going to teach other people how to be like them, and they start selling, you know, courses or videos or, you know, PDFs on how to be like them, and all of the interesting things about them go away. You know, they become sort of like the Ouroboros, the like snake eating its own tail. You know, they kind of just turn into this like echo chamber of their own self-importance, and it's sad because they're, you know, started off having something interesting to say, but ultimately the desire to be appreciated and to be loved is one that's common to all of us, and you know, some people get caught up in that. And I personally I try to not look at LinkedIn. It is such a like fast food, like junk food to my brain, and I say that as somebody who eats fast food and junk food because it's delicious. You know, I'm not a
What's your
health
favorite
food
burger?
person. My favorite burger is actually from,
but it has to be
Burger
like from a
King.
chain.
Yeah, no,
Burger
it's
King?
from
Yeah.
it's from Burger King. Yeah, that's my favorite. It might be
Mine's
a
a Big
weird
Mac.
take. It's a good one. It's a good one, and it's the same everywhere.
Yeah. I usually get shit for that, but I do think that Big Mac is like the perfect hamburger. I don't like
Well-
the craft stuff and like, you know, all the
It's just so
fancy ones.
you need to have going back to like people who self-promote and people who like to project their own insecurities into the world. It's like you want to have an opinion on everything. You say,
Palate.
well, I am somebody who has good taste and I have whatever. But they're denying. It's like people who say they don't like pop music. I'm like, it is weapons grade engineered to be catchy. If you say you don't like pop music, you might be a sociopath. There might be something seriously wrong with your brain.
I do think that when they say they don't like pop music, they just might be covering up, or not covering up. They're unable maybe to see the quality in the things that don't aesthetically fit them.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
a pop song can be a good song, but you might not like the style or the arrangement or whatever. But it's a good song. If somebody took the same song and sang it on an acoustic guitar in a I don't know, folky arrangement, maybe you would like it then, you know.
Yeah.
So sometimes that happens.
But maybe there's something else, like, you know, like maybe people do like it, but they're insecure just to say it because it's massively popular or something like this, you know, and they don't want to be seen as part of this larger group, right? So maybe that's, I mean, at least from my experience, you know,
They're afraid to project, to signal that vector of I like this, you know, into the world, because they are afraid of what might come back. They're not going to be like true hardcore guys, you know, because they like Taylor Swift.
Yeah, they don't like that they like it. And it is just it's just like sometimes I think that there's it's a funny thing because a lot of people are pursuing originality and they believe that they must have a truly unique perspective and they must not like or extol views that other people also like and extol. Whereas like being original is just, I think, being more true and like representing who you are Like, you're already an individual. You don't need to put in a bunch of time and effort to do it. You just have to like be whoever you are and like the things you like. And I was thinking about this as we were talking, because in terms of like being yourself and like running your own game and Dragan, like what you were saying with your, I just like to have conversations with interesting people. And also going back to responding to random emails, one of the people who I kind of like look at and I'm like, I want to be that person, is a guy named Cliff Stoll. He is a mathematician and computer scientist. I first heard about him. I read a book that he wrote called, I think, The Cuckoo's Nest. And it is a story. It is a book that is like a fictional story based on his own life, where he essentially caught the first example of computer hacker. He accidentally caught a Russian or a Soviet computer hacker breaking into the early internet, in like the 70s and 80s. Because he's like a very unique and curious guy, and he likes puzzles and he likes solving problems, and he's also very observant about the world. So anyways, I read this book. It's really fascinating, great book. And then later I saw that he has a website where he makes little glass bottles that are it's called a Klein bottle. It's like a mathematical kind of geeky shape. And he makes these at his home, and he sells them. And this is like international bestseller and like famous computer scientist Cliff Stoll. He makes these weird glass bottles, and he sells them on the internet. And so I was like, what happens if I buy one? So I bought one, and immediately he sends me an email, and he's like, hey, thanks for buying this. I'm making it right. I'm getting it from the basement right now. And then he when he sent them to me, he also emailed me pictures of him and his cats with like, he was like, here's the bottle that I'm sending you, and here's like pictures of me and my cats in my garden. And it was like a long rambling email, and he just like genuinely seems to just enjoy, like, there wasn't any sense of like, oh, I subscribed you to my drip campaign, you have a 30% membership discount to whatever. It was just like a person who is just genuinely nerdy, not asking for permission, like just like kind of being himself. And I was like, I just like was so charmed, and like I was like, I want to have that level of sort of self almost disregard. It's not even self-awareness. It's just like, I'm whatever. This is weird. Who cares if somebody didn't ask for pictures of me and my cats?
Here they are.
And like in his garden, like here they are. And like he had all these weird stickers that he sent along with it. And it was like super, super nerdy jokes about like, this object is like a hyperdimensional object and cannot be like, the QA failed because we couldn't look at it in the fourth dimension. And I'm like, this is like, he does all this stuff. And I had paid him, whatever, $30 for this weird thing. So that's a long story to say that like, I look at somebody like that, who's just like living their life, enjoying the things that they enjoy, and also creating joy in other people's lives, but just by virtue of them being themselves unapologetically. And I think that, to me, that's like always been a model and an inspiration for me to like, it's okay, you can be weird and nerdy, or what I mean, you doesn't have to be nerd. You can be into whatever you want to be into. If you like Taylor Swift, you can like Taylor Swift, and that's okay for a 40-year-old man to do. And like, it's okay to live that. And I think that other people will see that and be naturally drawn to, wanting to build those kinds of relationships with genuine, authentic people, instead of subscribing to your, 30-day, 8-hour video course and getting a certificate at the end. That I think people actually do want to have meaningful, personal, and rewarding relationships. it all starts to just like being open to being a little bit of yourself on the internet and answering emails from strangers who ask you to be on their podcast.
Awesome.
But
it
comes down to not being afraid of failure, because his
Yes.
communication might not land, and he's okay with that. Like, it doesn't
Yes.
matter. I acted positively. It didn't come back. That's fine.
I think that I can say this as somebody who has, experienced a lot of failure and also success in my life, and that's great. And now I'm at a point where I don't care as much. I posted something on my website recently, and occasionally, like, my blog posts will end up on Hacker News. I don't know how familiar you are with Hacker News, but I love it when that happens, because I get a bunch of people going to my website and signing up for my email list, and it feels very validating. Hey, people like reading what I wrote. The comments are so bad. So I got this thing, and it went on Hacker News, and there was just a couple of comments, but somebody took the time out of their day to write this comment. I'm gonna quote it exactly, because I was like, this is really they said, "This is peak midwit pop sci, plausible sounding but foundationally bereft." Like, somebody really wanted to tell the internet that they didn't think my thing was worth
They
reading.
saw through you.
Yeah, but like, those are hurtful words. If I was younger or earlier in my career, I probably would have felt really bad when I read that. Felt like I was being rejected. The internet is full of jerks who are gonna, like, obviously they read it, which is to me a really interesting thing, is like, well, okay, and yet you think it's foundationally bereft, but you took time out of your day to actually read it and write a comment about it. But I think that fear of failure, if I had been younger or earlier in my career, I might see a comment like that and be much less likely to share more in the future. Fortunately, I'm, at a stage where I just kind of don't care as much. But yeah, I think that's very real. I think the fear of failure is real. I think sharing things on the internet puts you in a very vulnerable place. And there are people who will critique your work, whether or not you ask them to. And in design especially, I think this is a thing that a lot of people who aren't designers don't know or don't understand, that to design something requires you to be vulnerable. Great design comes from a very personal place. Even if it's just buttons on a website, you are putting a little bit of yourself out there into the world. And when people see it, they will say if they like it or not. You don't need to be an expert in design to look at something and say, I like that color or I don't like that color. So as opposed to engineers who might not be used to having their work be so publicly visible and critiqued.
Understood.
Yeah, and they're understood and sort of reacted to. As a designer, you're getting people people are looking at your work and they're responding to it. And even if they have good intentions and want to say something positive, sometimes they react negatively. And so as a designer, you're putting your work out there, you're being judged all the time. As a designer, you need to have a portfolio on the internet. I was talking to my wife, who's an audio producer, and she was talking about her career and her job, and I was like, well, you should have a website. And she's like, why would I have a website? Like, audio producers, to get a job, they don't need a website. They don't need to put a portfolio of their work visible to everybody who might want to see it at all times. But as a designer, you're just expected to make yourself available for judgment at all times.
Oh,
And it is very
that's a good one.
it is very vulnerable feeling. It's like can be very demoralizing. And then there are people who make their entire public persona about looking at other people's work and judging it. You know, there's like a couple of well-known, and actually I don't even see, what was that guy's name? Eli, I don't remember. He was like a guy who was really well known for just saying mean things about other people's designs on the internet. And he, you know, that's what other, yeah, like, you know, what other career is like that?
But
where
that's
you just
that's, I'm reading that as like he's a troll and that's his angle to get engagement, right?
Oh yeah. His own design was like, he didn't have anything out there for other people to see. So yeah, like you can kind of hide behind, you know, I'm going to go out there and be a troll. But even in my, you know, advanced and more mature state, when I have somebody telling me that they looked at my website and they didn't like the way something looked, or they thought it was bad design, it does hurt. Even if they're a troll, even if I say to myself, well, that person clearly, you know, doesn't have a good relationship with their father, like it doesn't matter what I say to myself, you know, it still feels bad at this, like the first feeling that comes with critique.
Yeah, it stings.
Yeah, so I think that it can be hard to have the confidence to be yourself and to be vulnerable, and especially to just be the more you are just yourself, the more when somebody critiques you, it feels like a judgment of you as a person. Versus if I created this whole persona for myself and I said, I'm going to be this like very specific kind of designer, and I'm going to study, you know, Dieter Rams, and I'm going to design like Dieter Rams, and I put that out there, and then if somebody says like the orange you use for that button is too bright, I can just be like, well, it doesn't really reflect who I am as a human. It kind of reflects like this like Dieter Rams like persona I put out there. Versus if like, yeah, like if I go and I play the guitar and I put that music on the internet and somebody says they don't like it, like that's so much more of a personal, you know, judgment. It feels like a personal judgment of myself. So that's all to say that like maybe this is like maybe a little Disney like touchy feely, but you know, if you see stuff out there in the world and you like it, you know, you take a minute to like say like, hey, I like this, because there's so many people who are gonna critique it and so few people who are genuinely like sharing and appreciating each other for being vulnerable in themselves in the world. Sorry, I just realized we're now like
apply the sorry, you can probably apply the Pareto principle, right, to positive,
yes,
negative feedback.
Yes, absolutely.
Online.
Yeah.
80% is always negative.
This is really how to say, like revealing to me, if that's a right word, because like it's sort of a, I don't want to say totally opposite, but it's a bit different angle than your blog posts. You know, the way I know about you, where how we put it, we said like you have this scientific approach to curiosity, like where, you know, each of your blog posts is like, okay, this is what I'm interested in, this is how I started, and then you go in depth, and then you spit out like 15, 10 or 40 different footnotes, right?
Yes.
So where this, you know, like the whole thing reads and gives the impression of someone who is not, you know, fucking around, who is, you know, like, okay, this is, you know, I have some evidences on how I formed this opinion, even though I laughed when I read in one of the footnotes you said something like, apparently Hacker News disapproves this. so like, you know, like, jokes aside, like, you know, those again, like it's your pursuit of understanding the quality, the craft, design as a whole, right? So and this is I would say a good segue to touch upon this this topic a little bit, where I don't have a concrete question, but you worked in bunch of amazing places such as Stripe or like Copilot Money, or like you're now leading your own agency, like however you call it, like consultancy agency, your own thing. You worked at Bitly, and you are also working at W3C, which is World Wide Web Consortia. So to me, this is giving a really interesting approach and requirements of approach and different approaches of craft and designing stuff from totally different, like use cases. So I can give you some quotes as starters, your own quotes, if you will, or you can just go on this topic. Like,
well, I'd love to tie that together. My approach to writing comes from a place of curiosity. I love writing not because I like to sit and figure out the perfect words to put in the right order, but because often in the course of trying to prove something scientifically, let's say, the quality example, I wanted to try and prove that a top-down approach to quality doesn't work. Because when I was at Stripe, there was this really big push from leadership to define and control quality throughout the entire organization. And it was slow, and it was burdensome, and it was hard as a designer and as a manager to go through all the levels of reviews that everything needed to do. And so I had this idea. I was like, I don't think this will work. And I wanted to be right. I wanted to be like, I don't think this will work. So I started writing down my thoughts, and I was like, well, okay, I wonder what are some examples of places where it didn't work. And I started reading more, and I was looking at the auto industry. I am fascinated by the American auto industry versus the Japanese auto industry. And I started reading books, and those books had citations to other books, and you start to pull on all these threads, right? And as you go, if you were genuinely open-minded and curious, you discover that what you thought and what you wanted to prove, not so simple. Well, there are some examples of companies that had top-down quality mandates and that worked. Okay, how do I wrap that in? I could just throw away that idea and not acknowledge it because it doesn't agree with my thesis. Or I could change my thesis and say, okay, well, maybe it's not so easy. How do I define it? So,
what you find is sociologists do.
Yeah,
you throw
or
away
a scientist,
things that you
right?
don't like.
Oh, sociologists, yeah, or CEOs. But a scientist, if you have evidence, if you find evidence of something that disproves your hypothesis, you adjust your hypothesis. And so now, okay, let's go through this journey. You change your hypothesis, you go through this. And then the thing that comes out is usually well, it depends, which is not very exciting to read. People don't really like reading it depends. But to me, it feels like you kind of have to respect and be honest about how you got to your conclusion. And also I like to just leave breadcrumbs for people like me who like to read stuff. So I cite and put footnotes in as just sort of signposts to if you want to read more, here's some really interesting things. I hate when I read on Wikipedia and it'll say something all blackbirds are left-handed, and it'll just say something like that, and you're like, what? I want to know how did they even figure that out?
Where do you get that from? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's actually true, by the way. Please, no citation needed on that specifically. But okay, so the process of writing for me is a process of learning. And then I owe it to the universe to sort of show my work and let people follow those threads where they may. It's less of, and then like at the end, maybe I feel a little bit more confident that my position is a little bit less assailable. Like people could be like, well, hold on just a second, you're wrong. So this is like why I do the particular version of like scientific curiosity following that I do. It suits me really well because I like to, it's fun for me to read a bunch of weird scientific, journals and go back and read case law on copyright. To me is like, that's really fun and interesting. And so really what you see is the output of me having a good time reading a bunch of books and then like feeling, like it is nice to then take that and reflect it back into the world as something that other people can enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. But like, I mean, I appreciate everything you just said, but like the topic in itself is fascinating to me, like trying to understand the quality, because quality is, I mean, I call it quality. We can give it, we can give it different names. And I was listening to a presentation of Rasmus Andersson, the creator of Inter typeface, and he worked in Figma and Spotify, whatnot. So he said like, in his tenure in Figma, he said like, we were always talking about quality, and we said, okay, this is one of our top priorities, quality, but none of us could quantify it, and we would sit around and talk about it and go out and do our job, do our work, and then after 2 months we would come up to again and be like, oh, how do we improve quality? So it's it's something that we all can feel and understand, and like when we see it, but it's in day to day and in an organization especially when one of your mandates as a manager and director it is to improve the quality of different stuff, visible and not visible, organizational, whatnot. It's really hard to actually nail it, and honestly it could mean different things for different contexts and different people. At least it was like for me. So yeah, I'm this is why I appreciate it. So but which blog post was the most challenging or the hardest one to pull off? What topic was your
the one about quality I think took me the longest because it ended up being much more nuanced. Again, I went into it, and this is actually true of a lot of what I write. I went into it wanting to prove somebody wrong. I went into it with like this very strong-willed opinion of top-down quality mandates don't work. And it ended up being more complicated than that. And I was like, well, if it always does or always doesn't work, what am I actually trying to say here? What is it? What is useful? What can I actually do? And I like read a couple of papers that were like, here's 15 different ways to describe quality. And I'm like, this doesn't actually help. So I think it took a long time for me to come up with a definition that I felt good about. And the way I defined it was quality is the degree to which something meets or exceeds the expectations of people who use it. That idea that you are going to say, it is not about taste, it's not about me as the creator describing and creating something that I believe is quality, that the only thing that matters is the way other people perceive it. going back to your Big Mac, I think I mentioned Big Mac in that, and actually, like, this was a deep rabbit hole that I went down. I don't know if I actually shared any of it, of like the Big Mac index is anyways, not to go down the rabbit hole there, but a Big Mac can be a quality meal because, first of all, I don't expect it to be a gourmet dining experience. I expect it to be extremely consistent. It doesn't matter if I'm in New Jersey or if I'm in Serbia or if I'm in, Tokyo or it doesn't matter where I am, that a Big Mac is going to taste the same and it's going to cost something that's pretty reasonable. And so as long as those things are true and I go into McDonald's, I order a Big Mac and I eat it and it meets my expectations, that is a quality product. Now, there are so many problems with that sentence. A Big Mac is a quality product. Because, yeah, it's really bad for you and we shouldn't all eat Big Macs all the time. But I think that sentence, writing that down and standing behind it was very hard. And I did all the research and reading and looking at books and papers and citations and writing through that as a way of trying to stand behind that statement. And there's a few other things, like I wrote something about the hiring market for junior designers right now. In order for me to say the statement, tech companies are not hiring junior designers, and they should. I need to have the data. So I had to do a bunch of scraping of job sites and comparing it to historic trends. So those things were hard because I was saying something that was, big if true, maybe not like a bombshell, but something that was like a strong statement, and I needed to be able to back it up. Anecdotally, though, in terms of raw effort, the hardest thing, the blog post the thing in a blog post, not even a blog post, it is literally a footnote. I was writing about design systems and I was saying, well, design systems are kind of like dictionaries today. In that, in a dictionary, I look up the definition of a word and it describes it. So in a design system today, I'm like, what is a button? And I go to the page for a button and it tells me, here's what the button is and here's how you do it. That's not really a system. There's no it's a system in that a card catalog is a system, but it's manual, it's a reference thing. I like the idea of design systems as systems that have functions and are interlinked and have dynamic sort of connections. And if you change one thing, it changes another thing, and it's it all is alive. And so I made a metaphor, and I said, think about how you do mental math. When you learn how to do multiplication in school, you start by learning just what is 2 times 2 is 4. You don't have to do any math to know what 2 times 2 is 4 is. You start by looking at a table, and it's sort of like a dictionary for multiplying. I look up what 2 times 2 is, and it's 4. But then I learn how to do the multiplication process. And I can multiply any numbers together. I don't have to remember what, 17,324 times 222 is. I can do the process and I can come up with the answer. Okay, so I was saying that's design systems should be much more like the latter, where I don't have to look up the definition of that. I can just come up with a system that is dynamic in response to any combination of things I put into it. And I was okay, I was writing this. I was imagine what a book would be that was a multiplication dictionary for all of the numbers between 1 and 10 million. And as soon as I wrote that, I was oh shit. I have to figure out what that book looks like. What does it? I mean, I don't know. I have no sense. Is it because I might say that and somebody from Hacker News says actually I have that on my bookshelf and it's not that big. So I was okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to figure this out? So I wrote a program to start. It would
Of
It
course.
started multiplying out. It started figuring out the character, how many numbers are in. Okay, 2 times 2 equals 4. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters. Okay, 2 times 3 equals what? Okay, all the numbers, all the combinations of numbers between 1 and 10 million. I was like, oh, computers can do this. That's great. So I came up with this. I wrote this very badly programmed version. This was before Claude could code it for me, and I ran it, and it was like, okay, it'll take like a couple hours. I was like, okay, cool. So I like let it run for a while, and I came back. And I was like, wow, that's great. It finished, and it had just done one of the 10 million number. It was like it had done just like 1/10,000,000th of the work, and it had taken a few hours. I was like, oh no. Anyways, fast forward to I ended up writing a better version of the script and putting it up in Amazon to just run 24/7.
Cost you how much?
It took 2 years. It took 2 years to finish running. And I'm
That's
sure
like an art experiment.
It was kind of like some sort of performance art.
Performance art, yeah.
But it finished. I got a number out of it. It turns out the book would be, if you just had it, normal sized dictionary with normal sized paper, if you put it down on your floor, it would be literally 2 times the distance between the Earth and the Moon to the top of the book. So it would go. And so anyways, why it took 2 years for me to get the answer to this question. No, this is not useful information. I didn't create any deep meaning and value in this process.
Editors would love you, man. Have you ever worked with an editor?
Be like, oh, hey, Matt, how's that
ready
going?
In 2 years.
Great. Yeah, sorry. I had to figure out the size of a book that had all the numbers in it. So anyways, just in terms of raw value and amount of money I paid to Amazon to figure out this footnote, that was probably the hardest thing I wrote.
Okay, but your soul is satisfied, right? So
yeah, it was so satisfying.
Of course, but this is how you measure the satisfaction of such things. Is it's not like it's not really quantifiable. Like you have a cool story, right? Cool, but like, and we appreciate it now that we heard it. But like Hacker News, they would be like, no, you could write a better script and you could run it on and you could get the result in 15 minutes. It's not about that.
Google Cloud, not AWS.
You could shard it, It's not about that, right?
Exactly. It is the process of finding out, and that the process of finding out is so good and so fun and so enjoyable. And I think, honestly, not to make this about AI, but I could have had it now today. If I'd done this, I might have just asked AI to do it, and it might have gone off and done the answered that for me and written a script, whatever. But I didn't get to enjoy the process of finding out, and I think that's a shame. When I am looking at design and thinking about design and writing about design, whatever, there's a joy in finding out and answering a question, an absurd question, why do these colors look good together? That doesn't seem at first to have even an answer. But if you are I don't know, let me just go and try to figure it out. And then you end up learning that mantis shrimp have 17 different kinds of color receptors in their eyes, and they can see colors that we wouldn't even be able to imagine. Well, that was something fun that I learned in the process of finding out why 2 colors look good together or bad together, or and I just think that there's so much joy in finding out these things. Also, by the way, it's amazing to me that we have the resources and like that the internet exists, that I can just find these things out. You imagine like somebody in like the 12th century asking a question like that, and you know, they would have to like go into a monastery and spend their entire life just answering the question. Whereas today we have access to that. I can look at YouTube videos, I can listen to podcasts, I can read the books. So this is something that I'm like, if I'm talking to a junior designer, or if I'm talking to even any designer, and they're like, well, what do I do? How do I become a better designer? It's like, just try to ask questions and enjoy the process of figuring it out. And like, I think that you end up learning and being a much better person for it on the other end.
And that probably correlates with the importance of just play within serious work.
Yeah, play is such a good word for that.
Yeah, because it's it doesn't have the commitment to success that your regular work does. Like when you work on something, somebody or you yourself already have an expectation of what it should be when you're done.
Right.
And in play, that doesn't matter at all. The process is what matters. That you have fun. That it's a learning experience. It's just an experience. You do it like l'art pour l'art. So it's. I always found it interesting that that's the first thing that gets killed when businesses start making money and design teams in those companies. It starts to become just work, no play, because there's no more time to play. You're growing, things are crazy. I think maybe that's how Google came up with those 20% time rule, where they allowed you to do whatever you want. To maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, no, you're absolutely right. There's such a spirit of play when you hear about these things like Gmail, getting created in this 20% time, because somebody was like, I don't know, it would be fun to build an email again.
Have email
and like,
in the browser, yeah.
There are some very unique people who would say, oh, it would be fun to put email in the browser. Like, that doesn't sound like my idea of fun, but there's some people who that's their idea of fun. Or if you're like, Rasmus Anderson, like, my idea of fun is creating this typeface, which is like really hard. When I've have a little pet typeface that I'm designing, and you can tell that I take anything I do to like the nth, the most extreme degree, but to get to that level where you are supporting, Serbian internationalization for your typeface, that takes a very particular type of person to think that that's fun. And so if somebody comes to you and says, I want to try this thing, I think it'd be fun, and I'm like, I don't get it, and I'm their manager, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you have these OKRs you got to get to, and I shut that down and have that expectation that, like, no fun allowed, you lose the opportunity to get all these great things that come into the world. And I read about the history of Bell Labs. Bell Labs, the place where transistors were invented and a ton of other things. It was just people who were kind of having fun. They were like, what if we did this thing? I saw this really interesting, talk, or I read an interesting paper. And they would just go to each other's desks, and they would kind of nerd out on this idea, and they would say, well, wouldn't it be fun if we built this thing? And like, oh, we accidentally invented vacuum tubes and completely revolutionized and enabled the information age. But that didn't come out of an initial sort of like, I want to invent the internet. It came out of a curiosity and a problem solving and fun. And then the managers said, I'm going to let this play out. They didn't. They did, and actually, it's very interesting. They did push the team to commercialize their inventions, and created some positive pressure towards building things that would make money. But they didn't shut everything down if it was like, a dud on that angle at first. And like, Slack now, again, you might think that Slack is actually a curse on society, but you see how Slack was invented. It was invented as sort of a side quest to building a game, and they accidentally created like this revolutionary piece of software. I saw a thing with someone at Anthropic, and they were talking about, I think it was on like the Lenny's podcast, I think, where she was talking about how Anthropic does like side quest maxing, where they basically like, if you have a thing you want to build, you should go build it. We don't care. It doesn't have to make us money. And I think that like that there's so much wisdom in that. There's so much power in that, of getting people together who are genuinely smart and curious and saying, let's just play. It doesn't have to. I
wonder how many inventions have we come to see just because a scientist or a researcher was so bored out of his mind with his regular work. It said like, I'm just going to do this because I can't look at this other thing anymore that I'm supposed to be doing.
This is where I want to see like when like social media, like Instagram's detrimental effect on the progress of technology, because instead of just sitting around and being bored, we're just like scrolling our phones. And I don't know, being bored is really powerful, because you're like, what am I going to do? I'm going to look around and look at my lab bench and like, I don't know, what if I put these two things together? I wonder what would happen. And they explode, and you're like, whoa, that's cool. Why did that happen?
Do it again.
Do it again. Try to figure out why, So I think, the boredom is so important. Play is so important. Being genuinely curious is so important. And
basically everything that kids are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
like that's their entire thing.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I have a 3-year-old, and he's like insanely curious and like wants to know how things work, and that's great. And it's just a shame, our brains over time just lose that. It's not even, I don't want to even put it on like the sort of Western culture, insisting that we be whatever. There is an aspect of the fact that as we age, it's much harder for us to be in that mindset. But I also think that like scrolling Twitter or looking at LinkedIn also shuts that down. So I don't know. I love having conversations like this, which can only come out of answering weird emails. I love going to meetups and talking to people. And I go to meetups and people say, "Oh, what do you do? What do you do? You're a designer. I'm a designer. Whatever." I want to be like, what's your hobby? Do you have any pets? I have this concept called the birthday list, which is the list of people you would invite to your birthday. Whenever I meet somebody at a meetup or whatever, I sometimes think, what would it take for us to get to the point where we invite each other to our birthdays? Because you got to really like somebody or know something about them to invite them to your birthday. I have been to a lot of these design meetups, and I've seen some people at 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and I know their name and I know what they do, whatever, but I'm not going to invite them to my birthday. But like, I have, there's this guy, Donnie D'Amato in New York, who like, every time I see him, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. You're like somebody who I want to spend more time with, and I enjoy having conversations with. And our conversations are not about like, what is design? It's like weird stuff, and like his hobbies, and like, playing video games and stuff in it. And so I think that like that spirit of play and that spirit of like, it doesn't have to be serious and we can be and talk to each other like individuals is something that's lost at work, certainly, but also lost in like we all have to be like these like god tier designers on Twitter and have like, you know, linear retweeting our posts. It's just like, yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah, but like, I mean, exactly, and this is, I wanted to say this is why we have you on a podcast, because you think like us, and but jokes aside, like this is how Dragan and me started this podcast. Like basically,
Exactly.
we were in pandemic and we haven't been seeing each other that much, but whenever we would see each other, we would be, you know, eager just to talk with someone, especially with one another, and basically we were like, hey man, like we have these really weird and you know, strange and call it however we want, obscure conversations. Would it be fun to just record them and to you know, like see what it happens? And he was like, yeah man, but who would like to listen to this, right? But there are people like us. I mean, and at first we thought like maybe, you know, 5 of our friends, but now these are not like our friends are not listening to us, but friends of our friends, and you know people who we don't even know. So this is and as you were talking about, you know, your way to realization of, you know, starting the blog post and the journey and like realization and being, you know, a bit wealthier with knowledge of some conclusion or maybe it's not a conclusion, maybe it's a, you know, like a new landscape where you can go. I was wondering, you know, is this a curse in itself as well? For example, you would, you know, you would start with a small pack, you know, like of a question, and then you would come up with a corpus of knowledge, and then you would go to your work, and your work would be, you know, workplace or job, whatever, call it however you want, would be something else. But now you cannot cut off the new piece of knowledge that you have, and you know. Sort of could be a pressure to apply all of this new thing that you know to the work that you do, even though none of your managers or your peers or whoever is expecting this from you. And now you're in this position where, you know, you have like a pressure that you're putting on yourself, but like, you know, have you... Did this happen to you sometimes?
Yeah,
like...
absolutely. Like,
okay.
Oh man, people, I learned, and this was like, you know, a good lesson for me to learn, but I learned it the hard way. I was like, people don't really like it when you're like, oh, I wrote something about this. Here, let me link you to my blog post. And like, no, people don't like that. People. So a lot of this is like, at the end of the day, when I'm working with somebody and they say, can you design this? It doesn't matter that like I know about how many colors mantis shrimp can see. No, it doesn't matter at all. The way to design a list page on a B2B SaaS app is the same whether I have all this information or not. So, you know, there is something to be said about like some of this is kind of self-important, can be very like more inward facing, that then I maybe try to justify by saying it makes me a better designer. But what I experienced recently was, after having written this thing about quality and like doing all this research and having blog posts that take me years and read a dozen books and all this stuff, is that when I would sit down and like have an idea, I would be immediately overwhelmed by the oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do all this research and it's gonna take me forever, and I would never actually start writing things on the page. Recently though, like I was on the train on my way into the city, and I had this weird idea about an architect that was asked to design a building, but what would it be like if nobody knew what the building actually looked like? It would be very hard. And because that's what it feels like being a designer right now, is people ask you to design stuff, and then you're like, well, okay, I'm working with a couple clients right now, and they'll be like, okay, well, can you design this page? And I'm like, well, what does a page look like? And they're like, nobody really knows because it was all built by AI. And like, by the way, it changes every 5 minutes because a new engineer is shipping stuff. So it's like, man, that would be really weird if as an architect I went in to help a client and redesigning their office, and they're like, nobody knows what the office looks like. You got to figure it out. And so I just decided to start. I didn't do any research. I didn't do any I didn't find books on this or whatever. I just kind of started typing. And I was on a train, so like I had a very nice, like, here's 45 minutes where I was going to be on the train. And I didn't have Wi-Fi, so I was just sort of like typing. And at the end of it, I had like pretty much a blog post. I was like, whoa, that was awesome. And I published it. I don't even think it has any footnotes. And it felt very good, and it reminded me of like part of that process of self-expression is lost whenever I try to go in and like do these like very scientific kind of things. But it is very it kind of requires me to be in the right mindset, because it's not my default mode. It requires me to have the right conditions and like be on a train with no Wi-Fi and kind of not let myself get distracted by all of the rabbit holes I can go down. So I think that like having those constraints and like putting myself in a position where I can't reach for the same tools is really, really useful. And I think that it's probably true about design right now too, is like there's so much. I find myself when I want to design something immediately going to like Mobbin or whatever and looking at like, what are the other ways that people have done this before? And loading up the Figma MCP and starting to be like, okay, let me just like come up with all these things. And then I don't know, I feel like it can be very overwhelming, but we tend to make it so by like having access to all the tools and having access to all the information, having access to all the examples and rabbit holes to go down, when in reality, like the final product, it doesn't really matter. Like, again, nobody really, for all of the knowledge that I've gained and all of the sort of self-fulfilling sort of curiosity-driven research that I've done, does the button that I put on the page look any better than the button you would put on the page? No, probably not. Yeah, that's, I think that this is where I come back to these questions of like taste versus like craft or whatever, is like people who have taste are often like people just who have a unique point of view out of the box. It's not that they like have access to the best resources or like know the best examples to pull. It's just that they have a unique point of view and they express themselves well.
Honestly, everybody's talking about taste these days. A while ago, I settled on, well, it's not a definition of taste, but it's my understanding of taste. People that have taste are the people that can't stop thinking about things.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. In order to have taste, you have to be able to recognize something interesting in something, and to understand why that is interesting and compare it to other things that you found interesting. So it's a non-stop cycle of comparison. Your brain just never shuts off. And you are able to recognize quality and good because you've seen so many things and processed so many things. I honestly don't think it's any more than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's all that magical. Like you're born with this aesthetic preference that always wins or is good to most, or it's perceived as good to a lot of people. It's just the ability to process a ridiculous amount of information and be willing to do it, or just do it subconsciously. And that's sort of how I've come to deal with it.
I think that's a really good description of, I mean, the word taste is like so loaded, and it's not even, I almost want to come up with some other word for it, but it's like, I remember there's like this artist named Andy Goldsworthy who does like, his art is often working with nature, whether it's taking leaves and assembling them in an interesting way or whatever, but he, there's some interview with him where he's like talking to somebody and they're walking through a path, and they're out in the woods, and it's like starts raining, and he's like, hold on, and he just goes and he lays down on the ground, and like it was like just a short little burst of rain, and then the rain ends, and he gets up, and he has created this outline of himself on the ground that is like, you're like, whoa, yeah, that's cool. You've just made a piece of art out of yourself by lying on the ground. He was like while this interview is going on, he, in the back of his head, a moment presented itself, and he took advantage of it and created a piece of art. That's exactly what we're talking about, where it's like he has something going on all the time that he's like attuned. There's like a resonance that happens between him and the world around him, and he sees an opportunity and he takes it. And he's not like,
I'm sure that's how it works. I have a friend who was, I think you condition yourself to be like that. It's such
absolutely.
A discipline.
There's a discipline to it, and there's sort of like a acceptance and willingness to try a thing that like you're kind of feeling a feeling about. I don't know. I wish there was like a more concise way to do it, but it's like I'm feeling some weird attraction or gravitation towards this idea, and I'm just going to kind of like follow it and let it guide me.
So there is this like this basically quote. It's not a quote, but the producer of Lana Del Rey. I mean, his name is Jake or Jack Antonoff. I don't know how to pronounce it. So he's really a famous producer, but back then he wasn't so. And in one of the interviews, he said something like he was basically dissecting the whole track, and he was talking, I don't know, like maybe about the hi-hats or something. And he said, like, do you hear it? Do you hear it now? No, you hear just the delay. So, and he said something along the lines like, we need to create the condition, we need to create the emotion for people to hear instruments that are not there. So this is why, Lana Del Rey sounds and her production sounds the way it sounds, because the whole thing is about hearing a thing and imagining the rest. And I think that this is what's really hard to do these days in the work of line that we are doing, because everything should be so exact. I'm not saying we should treat our work as art, right? Like it's not that, but there's room, there are cracks that you can, just feel or leave unfilled for people to feel something, right? So just to at least, and there is this really great book that I read like a couple of years ago. It's called Shishaki or Shishake. It's Japanese art of shaping behavior through design. So basically this guy figured out, and he invented this discipline where, for example, in a park, if you put a circle on a stick, you can expect that, on a certain level, you can expect that kids would come here and look through it. So you basically designed you left a beacon somewhere, and you can expect a certain behavior. So he's giving like, you know, throughout the book, he's giving like 200 examples of different objects in space and like environment, where how you can design a certain behaviors, which is really applicable to the UI and UX, call it however you want, product design, where, you know, not all the patterns should be measured in milliseconds and you know, next, right click and all this. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, to me this is really broad and a really interesting topic, and I don't know how much time do we have and how, you know, energy and all of this, but like, yeah, like, I don't know, Dragan and me, we always talk about this, and it's not even a philosophical, it's you know, it's poetical. Even two of us don't quite understand each other, but like, yeah.
But if we were always talking about how we're ready for the new era of interfaces, of things on the web, interactive things. If we're ever going to, I feel like we were never closer than we are now to it, because I feel like the designers were always found it hard to go all the way because of the whole coding thing. Now you're actually enabled to create a full fidelity product, not just a mock-up of that product, and try to direct the execution.
Yes, I think that there's this promise of, okay, we're gonna put the full ability to bring something into the world into the hands of a single person. And that person doesn't have to be a software engineer anymore. It can be a designer, it can be a PM, it can be whatever, it can be my 3-year-old. That is an amazing feeling, but unfortunately the tools right now are still extremely homogeneous in terms of how they bring it into the world. And so there is this feeling of, well, I just put my thing into Claude Design and it output a thing, and that feels really cool. How great is it that I'm creating? But now we're already seeing that, like, I don't know about y'all, I can tell if something was designed with Claude.
Oh yeah.
And
here's
why?
this,
and this
italicized word in your heading.
Yeah, and this is, like, by the way, this is a thing I'm deeply interested in studying, is why and how that actually came to be. But I think that it is tempting to do that and be like, how great is this? I created something original, when you're not actually realizing that the thing is like really sanding down any of the interesting and weird things. Because statistically speaking, it's just regressing to the mean. And so the things that are making you unique and interesting are, by definition, outliers. They don't exist in the data set. And the LLMs are really good at ignoring anything that looks like a statistical outlier and shaping your work back down to the statistical mean of its training data. And we don't even know what all that training data is. So there are ways to try and pull it away from that center of gravity, but you have to just be very skeptical of its output. You have to be very, like, sort of intentional about not letting it italicize the things. And even though that looks good and feels like it's like, but like, what would you have made it? Why not make it Comic Sans? Why not make it whatever it is you want it to be? And so I hope that the future of, like, these tools admit and allow for more of the statistical outliers, and they do less shaping and sanding down of weirdness to allow for the diversity of ideas and thoughts. Because I think that that's where the real exciting and cool innovation and design will happen is those weird outliers, is the people who had taste, and maybe we didn't even know it at the time, maybe we didn't call it because we didn't, it wasn't trendy, but they made something because they thought it should exist in the world, and the LLM didn't say actually make it orange. We saw that, we liked it, and now we say, oh, that person has a great taste, whatever. But it really is just coming back to the being, first of all, willing to be yourself, and also being sort of forceful. Just being this is me. I'm not going to let the tools sand down the unique things I have to say. And whether it's the tools or whether it's the critics on Hacker News, it's just sort of having the sort of patience and fortitude and discipline to be the, let your unique approach to the world come through all the way to the other end of the process.
Awesome.
I would
let's use that as a closing closing speech. Yeah, I really like that.
Definitely,
Awesome.
definitely.
Well
I
said.
wanted to say the same. Matt, so last thing, is there anything that you would like to promote, whatever, whomever, anything that you would like to share that you haven't so far, whatever comes to your mind?
I, as much as I wish I was totally immune to the good feelings of people reading and looking at my website, I love it when people read and look at my website and sign up for my email list so I can send you stuff. So definitely, want people to check that out and to email me randomly with thoughts or ideas, and I've had lots of great conversations with strangers about design through that medium. I'm talking at Figma conference in June about actually one of my essays about density in design, and so if anybody's going to be at config, please say hi and come watch me talk about density. But other than that, I think reading and sharing stuff that you find genuinely interesting is the thing I always want to promote and encourage. So that's all I have to promote.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome.
Is there someone who would like to hear on our podcast?
We were talking about Rasmus Anderson. He's that's a great designer who is very near and dear to my heart. I think I was just reading a really good piece of writing by Elizabeth Goodspeed, I think her name is.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she was writing about why do we need to define every aesthetic. These are people who are, I read what they write and I see them talk and they feel like kindred spirits to me. So take that with a grain of salt. If you want a bunch of nerds coming on your podcast and talking about writing, that's great.
She's an archivist, right? Essentially.
Yeah. And then I think the not boring guy, what's his name? I'm Andy Allen. You want to talk about play and what happens when you just be unapologetically and authentically yourself. He's someone who is making apps that are just so delightful and so fun and joyous. And Apple said, here, you get the design award. And it didn't come out of I want to make the best business software for executives to see dashboards on their phones. It came out of a desire to play and to experiment and to share that with the world. So I think I would love to hear their perspective on design.
Awesome
Cool.
examples.
Will that
Or the wish list.
with that I would conclude our episode today. Nothing to add. Like you said it. You said it all. Dragan, is there anything that you would like to say?
No,
This
I don't want to
closing
ruin
word?
it.
Okay. So thank you all for listening. Till the next time, stay strong, be curious, all of that.
Play.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Play. Thank you, Matt, for being
Thanks,
with us.
Matt.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Ciao.